Yeah, so I'm a medical physics assistant at Huntsman. And I'm also an incoming Wayne State. So I got applies, talk to me later. But I'm presenting on the clinical implementation of our new SNC IVD2 diode system for in vivo dosimetry that we commissioned. It took, I'll show you a timeline, I'll go through an outline, but it took a process of like basically 2 years. It was very long. Should be now. I just put yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so before I go over an outline of what I'm going to talk about, just a general motivation of why I'm presenting, why this might be important to you. We previously used the Landauer MicroStar OSLD chips for our in vivo dosimetry. In our clinic, we use in vivo measurements only for implanted devices, TBIs, TSEs, and special circumstances like pregnant patients or skin dose. So we don't do measurements for every single patient like other clinics. And so given that our old system, Landauer, was recalled, we needed a new system, and we chose Clear for their established technology, their durability, and their active dosimeter properties, so we could get real-time measurements. And at the time when we were making this choice, other options that were available to us were classic film, TLDs, MOSFETs, and then the MyOSL. They had just produced their new chips, but it was about a month after we started commissioning. So not the best timing, but that is an option now. So an outline of what I'm going to talk about. First, our clinic size and our clinical needs, the timeline of the project, commissioning each vault, what special commissioning looked like, training and troubleshooting at our clinic, our specific challenges, and then key takeaways. And at the end too, if you want, if this is applicable to you, I have a PDF QR code of our slides. So you can take it home, share it with your friends, hopefully. Okay, so our clinical size at Huntsman, we have 4 True Beams and 1 Halcyon at our main campus. We have Paton vault, but we do dosimetry in there. And then we also have 2 satellite locations with 1 True Beam each. And at main campus, we treat about 150 patients a day with, like I said before, the special and complex treatments like TBIs and TSEs, SRSs too. And so at each of our True Beam vaults and also our Halcyon vault, we have 1 diode set per vault. You can borrow and move that full set between vaults, so that's also an option if your clinic's not able to buy 1 for each vault. So I just want to practice that. I can talk about that more later too. So the timeline, this is kind of what I alluded to at the beginning. I wanted to put this out visually so you could just see how long and what steps it took for us to commission. On the bottom left is a little legend of what category each step went into: admin, clinical, and vendor related. So for our first year, purchasing took a year. And that's also dependent on our clinic size, purchasing cycle, legal contracts, etc. But just be mindful of that. We also started commissioning around the holidays, which was not awesome timing, and during our transition from Mosaic to Aria, so there were later treatment hours. There was a lot of chaos, but that's when they were the old OSLG chips were recalled, so we kind of had to do that. And then at the end, after we did main commissioning at vaults 1 through 5, or main campus vaults, and we performed education and in-service materials, which I'll talk about later. We then went and commissioned our 2 satellites and implemented total QA monthly and daily checks for both therapists and physicists, and then the TSE commissioning as well. So general commissioning info. Also, before I go into it, I put our TG report that we used, TG62, and also there's a QR code at the end if you want to have the link for it. Don't want to look it up yourself. I wouldn't. So for commissioning at each normal vault, we followed TG62 as well as special the instructions from Sun Nuclear when we were given the equipment and told to proceed. So vaults 1 through 5 and our 2 satellites, and each one had 2 to 4 energy specific diodes per vault from this graph I made on the left for the therapist at each diode collective site. So depending on what energies are used at that vault, so for our Halcyon, we only have the 2 yellow ones. We use 6 triple F, but our TSE vault, we have the black one, but it just depends on what energies are used there. For each setup, we use 20 cm of solid water, and 10 by 10 fielded 100 SSD for consistency across all of them. And initially each commission took about 3 hours per vault, and we did have 7 vaults total, so that is a lot, but it improved with the learning curve. And also I'm saying there were one other main physicist, Thomas Martin, who was doing this with me, and then another physicist, Nick Nelson, and then a student who was shadowing, who was also part of our team. So it's kind of a communal effort. I'm not going to dive into this, but I wanted to just put it on here for y'all's reference if you wanted to look later of just pros and cons of different in vivo measurement devices and choices, and maybe what would be right for you in your clinic depending on your needs. So it includes diodes, MOSFETs, TLDs, OSLDs, and then different kinds of film. So I'm not going to talk about it, but you can go back and see it. And then so once we did those basic commissioning for vaults 1 through 5 and the satellites, special commissioning for our TBI and TSC procedures where we do verification measurements were needed. And so we do these verification measurements in the first fraction or fractions for TSC, so we cover all 6 treatment positions with all the bodily angles, due to their nature of extended SSD and dose rate, which will be different over doses delivered. So for the TBI setup, it's pictured here on the right. We commissioned it with the patient treatment setup that's 20 cm of solid water with bowls. I know it looks kind of weird, but it's on a stretcher with the spoiler, like yeah, you know what I mean, the thing right in front of it. So that's why it looks kind of clouded too. If you look closely, you can see my reflection taking a picture. And then for a TSC commissioning, we commissioned with the patient setup on our TSC stand with hand calcs, which Jeff was also a part of it. Thanks, Jeff. So once we commissioned for all of our general procedures and our special treatments, we have to think about training and troubleshooting for physicists and therapists. So training-wise, we created hands-on in-services, presentational in-services, and user guides for both physicists and therapists. And in addition, created total QA monthly and daily checks that can be implemented into daily and monthly routines. And then troubleshooting, as you can see here on the left, we created a guide called What's Wrong with Your Diodes Game Show to make problems more approachable and fun, because no one wants a clinical call when everyone's very stressed. So we created this to really highlight like the main handful of ways that your diode system might not be working in the moment, whether that's something, and these are all things I'm going to say that do happen kind of frequently. Maybe something became unplugged. Maybe someone accidentally turned off one of the pods in the diode setup. Maybe it wasn't on the charging stand and now it's dead. And so what do you do in those circumstances? And they're easy fixes, but sometimes it's hard to tell in the moment when a patient's on the table, everyone's stressed out, your measurement's not reading. So we have this at every vault. And we also went over it with our physicists. So our main challenges in this process, first of all, our very long purchasing cycle that you saw on our timeline graph, a lot of legal contracts and holdups. So just be mindful that that might happen to you depending on the size of your clinic. Extra time for TBI and TSC commissioning. You have special treatments that'll need special commissioning. Wiring for us. So if you have like a straight shot from your treatment console outside into your vault, maybe you can do it yourself. We were able to do one ourselves. The other ones, I do not recommend that at all. And it is kind of dangerous, so don't do that. But we'll have to work with our vendors and Americom, is the wiring in our clinic. And so there's just a lot of small extra holdups. So being proactive about that is something to keep in mind. The software installation locally at each treatment console. We have to get help from Sun Nuclear since it wasn't super straightforward on how to download locally in each one. And then we had to work with our IT department to make a larger server to connect them all, so all your commissioning info's in one place. So being proactive about thinking how you want to organize all of your commissioning data info in your clinic. Faulty equipment, it happens if you're ordering a lot, some of it might not work. And it happened to us twice. We ordered 7 kits, so 2 things, I think 2 pods weren't working. So just being really communicative with your rep and asking for replacements quickly, something to keep in mind. And then the final thing, which I talked about in the training and troubleshooting slide, is active dosimeters need active troubleshooting. So knowing that past commissioning, that's always gonna be a challenge that you're gonna face, and so it's not mitigating the problems when they come up, because those problems likely will happen a lot. It's responding how quickly you're able to approach them when a patient's on the table and getting familiar with that. Which a fun way is making a game show. And then you can like neutral out the mood and just be able to respond quickly. So education and training is very important. So the key takeaways I want to impress upon all of you is one, request before you need. We did not, and we really needed it. And so that's why purchasing took a very long time. Two, create thorough training for your therapist and your physicist, and make sure both in-person, hands-on, and presentational training that people can go back and refer to, because people juggle a lot of new trainings, especially therapists who are constantly having new things asked of them. So making sure you're approaching them where they're at and not just telling them from afar. And then three, anticipate needing help and facing challenges. And like I said, contacting your IT department, your wiring people, your vendors, and knowing who to reach out to before all chaos breaks loose. You can anticipate that chaos may break loose. And these are the sources that we used. The reference guide they gave us, TG62, and then also TG203 was that graph with all the different Vivo dosimetry options, if you want to go back and look at it. And thank you. And that's my email and the two people who worked with me.
Any questions?
And how often do you have to calibrate those?
That's a good question. Monthly. So unless you see a dose difference of more than 2%, we've included it in just the monthly calibrations that happen at each fall with output. So yeah.
Have you noticed any variation within that?
Yeah.
So should it be more often?
Let me distinguish calibrate versus QA. I think he's saying calibrate versus like measuring a comparison with your reference. Does that make sense?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I see what you're asking. So every month we check just the output of the intolerance, and we're not changing it every month, to my knowledge. I don't know if anyone speak now, if you do experience that. Within the first 4 months, I think we did have to recalibrate